There exists a kind of creature in this world. It has been discovered by only a few people, but its existence has never been confirmed. We collectively refer to such creatures as unidentified mysterious animal, or unconfirmed living organism, abbreviated as UMA. Hello everyone, welcome to the UMA series. The White Nile is one of the two main tributaries of the Nile River in Africa. In a broad sense, it refers to the river sections that flow from Lake Victoria through Lake Kyoga to Lake Albert. Its complex waterways and vast swamps form endless stretches of untouched wilderness. The local tribes say that in these boundless waters, there lives a gigantic monster, larger and fiercer than any python. And that is our topic for today. The water monster. From the folklore of the White Nile Basin, it is called Lao, a giant aquatic creature resembling a snake or catfish, said to dwell in the vast swamps of Sudan. As for the origin of the name Lao, I found no clear explanation. It's simply known that the Dinka, Nuer, and Shilluk people all use this word to describe the creature. In the 1929 Newer English Dictionary by Sir R.C. Hodgkin, the term Lu is used to denote a large and fearsome aquatic animal, believed to have gone extinct, and possibly deified as a mythical being. The earliest written record we can find about this creature comes from the 1923 Sudan Notes and Records, authored by Henry Jackson, a British Egyptian official serving in the Upper Nile province. At the end of his report, there was a passage that said, "It is said that there are two distinct kinds of pythons in the Nuer region. One lives in deserted termite mounds, large enough to swallow a hornbill or an antelope. The other is amphibious, measuring between 12 and 20 feet long, capable of devouring an entire sheep or goat." I also heard of a third legend, a giant serpent the Nuer people deeply feared. It might have been a creature of their imagination. The Nuer and Dinka called it Lao, while the Shilluk referred to a similar serpent as Nile. It was described as massive and muscular, over 40 feet long, with a pale brown or dark yellow body. Between its belly and tail was a ridge about 3 inches long and 2 fingers wide. Its movement left deep tracks on the ground it crossed. It had 4 separate jawbones on each side, each about 4 inches long, with skeletal features similar to those of a python. When people found these bones, they kept them carefully as lucky charms. Its bones were believed to ward off evil. Some say the Lao had a short mane on the back of its head. Others claim it had long hair, used to entangle its prey and drag them into the river. Its belly was said to rumble like that of an elephant, producing deep growls. Some accounts suggest that people have truly seen this creature. In 1914, for example, in the Adar swamps, a complete skeleton of a giant snake was divided among the Nuer. In the early 20th century, a 40-foot-long specimen was discovered in the western town of Wau. It was slain by the local tribespeople, and later even human sacrifices were offered to it. It was said to appear often in the swamps of the Arab River, and even in the Jur River region. The Lao is believed to possess supernatural powers. The Nuer said its gaze symbolized death. If it saw a person first, that person would die. But if a person saw the Lao first, they would be safe. Most of the time, it stayed in caves, along the rivers or swamps, and people feared it deeply. As soon as they see traces on the ground showing signs of the creature's presence, they immediately flee in the opposite direction. Stories about this creature are widespread along the Arabian River, the Adar Swamp, and faraway places like the Jaya River. All the records about its color, jaw, and body shape are surprisingly consistent. In 1924, a British writer named John Miles mentioned it in his book Art of the Upper Nile. He specifically traveled to Malakal to interview an officer named Stevens, a seasoned hunter, who also managed a long stretch of telegraph lines along the Nile's East Bank. He often interacted with local indigenous tribes. The article was based directly on Stevens' own accounts. Overall, Stevens' description of the creature did not differ much from Jackson's version. However, the reported size increased to 100 feet in length, and it was said to be as thick as a horse. Its tongue was covered with huge tentacles or coarse bristles used to seize prey. The creature was described as extremely rare. An employee named Abraham Muhammad claimed that, in a village called Wujia, he had seen a slain specimen. Here, Stevens also mentioned an individual killed in the Adar Shilluk people, and said he had obtained some remains of the creature. and handed them to Jackson. Jackson then sent them to the British Museum for identification, but no satisfactory explanation was ever found. A man named Laba Limby from the Azanda tribe in also claimed to have seen a similar monster in nearby swamps, which had been killed as well. Additionally, Stevens met a Belgian administrator in Rijaf, on the west bank of the White Nile, who was firmly convinced of the creature's existence because he had once seen a massive serpent-like animal in the swamp. He fired several shots at it, but the bullets had no effect. As the creature retreated into deeper water, it left behind a massive trail across the swamp. In 1937, a British colonial named officer, William Sissons, stated in his essay Mysterious Beasts of Africa, and Lakwata were likely the same animal. Their nocturnal calls and mythic relics shared striking similarities. He said, their features and mythic associations were nearly identical. If you're interested in Lakwata, you can check my earlier videos. Sissons also provided a photograph of a wooden carving of the Lau's head. The statue's owner was an artist from Alamba district, Singida province, Tanzania, named Mother Shingu. However, to be honest, I personally couldn't tell how that photo accurately reflected the actual shape of the Lau's head. In 1939, British author Frank Lane wrote in Natural History Reviews that Sissons had sent him a letter, which included that same photo, and mentioned that Mother Shingu, in her youth, had once hunted and traveled around the Victoria Swamp and Nile wetlands. When Sissons doubted the creature's existence, she sarcastically replied, when I was young and ignorant, I might have said your cars didn't exist either, because I had never seen, or even heard of such a thing. But now, there's a car right in front of me, and I've even ridden in it. I've heard its engine running. It's the same with the legend of the Lau. In 1955, cryptozoologist Bernard Heuvelmans detailed the Lau's records in his book On the Track of Unknown Animals. As his article spread, he received more feedback from people who claimed to know the truth. In 1959, a well-known Sudanese administrator, Thomas Owen, wrote a letter to Heuvelmans, reporting a similar experience. In 1960, he recorded this account in his book, Hunting Big Game with Gun and Camera. In Chapter 6 of the book, he mentioned that among the many legends related to aquatic creatures, Lau never had a first-hand witness, at least not a living one. It has been given various identities, possibly a brontosaurus, a giant crocodile, or a mysterious python, an oddly shaped mamba, or perhaps a product of illusion and superstition. The Dinka people fear a creature called Yak Enyionyong. It inhabits only certain swampy waters, often far apart from one another. Although people do not avoid these waters entirely, they tend to stay away from those specific places. Yak Enyionyong was said to be about 3 miles long, with tentacles stretching a quarter mile. It could prey on swimming creatures, attack canoes, and snatch humans, but it preferred to hide its prey, drain its blood, and leave the body floating on the water or washed ashore. This creature was most often seen in a section of the Arab River, which divides the Ghazal River from Kordofan to the north. On a hot day in early March, Owen and British officers from 2 provinces, a Dinka chief, Arab elders, and dozens of tribesmen, were resting under the shade along the northern bank. They saw a flock of green-brown ducks swimming by, so his colleague Bob fired and hit one. The duck flapped several times and stopped in midstream. Bob took off his clothes and jumped into the water, intending to retrieve it. After swimming a short distance, Owen noticed he suddenly looked anxious and froze. Then he shouted, "There's something there." Moments later, he screamed, "My God, I'm getting out of here." Then he sank underwater. Owen had to jump in, fully clothed, to rescue him. He swam back to shore, while the young Dinka guide had already fled in terror. Half an hour later, the chief arrived, calling them lucky, and said that 3 days earlier, that same creature had taken one of their soldiers. At that time, on the opposite bank still lay the remains of a bull sacrificed to appease the monster. According to Owen, these accounts lack scientific basis and are often vague and one-sided. During oral transmission, they tend to be exaggerated. Interestingly, such beliefs stem from experience. Africans rarely fabricate entirely imaginary creatures. The Dinka people understand crocodiles very well, and would never confuse them with other animals. As for the legend, he kept an open mind, ready to consider any future evidence of Lau's existence. Cryptozoologist Bernard Heuvelmans supported William Sington's claim, believing that Lau and Lakwata belong to the same species, because most East African lakes are connected to the Nile through swamps at its source. The remains of both creatures were used to make amulets with similar magical powers. Its bad reputation even extended to nearby parts of the Congo. He believed that compared to giant pythons, Lau and Lakwata should rather be identified as giant catfish, since all descriptions of Lau contradict each other if applied to one species. In fact, the term Lao, first used by Jackson as a tribal name, may not be accurate at all. As mentioned above, the Shilluk people called it Nile, while the Dinka feared Yak Enionyang. These differences may indicate that Lao is actually a collective name for a type of animal, such as an unknown large aquatic creature. Most sightings can be explained by fish. Uvelman's inclined to think Lao was some kind of giant catfish. In southern Africa, the largest catfish we currently know of is the long-whiskered, sharp-toothed, also known as the African sharp-toothed catfish. The largest recorded specimen reached 1.5 meters and weighed 55 kilograms. Looking at its appearance, those four prominent paired structures do make it easy to imagine the main people described for Lao. Then there is the Nile bichir, an ancient fish species native to Africa. From the Nile to the Congo Basin, and on to Senegal and other West African countries, their traces are found across the continent. They are generally gray, with a row of neatly arranged dorsal finlets and rhomboid ganoid scales to protect themselves from predators. The largest known, but unconfirmed, individual reached 1.2 meters in length. Professor Uvelmans believed the ridge on a bichir's back might be mistaken for Lao's head crest. The African sharp-toothed catfish, also called the Egyptian catfish, can move over land during droughts, using accessory breathing organs to take in air directly. Its air sac can produce an audible rumble, which could explain Lao's roaring phenomenon. As for the deified legend that seeing Lao means certain death, such terrifying accounts may come from the electric catfish's discharge. While it poses no direct mortal threat to humans, it is enough to shock and panic people. Additionally, African lungfish could also contribute to confusion as they burrow into mud beneath swamps to estivate, and can show pronounced aggression when startled. Clearly, however, no single fish can fully account for all descriptions of Lao, and the known maximum sizes of these catfish do not match the legendary monster. Still, the professor held that given how large catfish grow in Eurasia and the Americas, it is quite possible that Africa's swamps harbor an undiscovered giant catfish species. Overall, I personally think Lao is most likely a product of misunderstanding. From the information we have, the core contradiction is abundant and highly consistent folklore versus the near total absence of identifiable physical evidence. Moreover, Lao and Liquata differ considerably in detailed descriptions of their forms. The latter seems more like a huge aquatic or amphibious reptile, based solely on descriptions of Lao. I can only think of the South African Nkanyamba because explorers recorded that local distinguished it from ordinary pythons, yet still described it as an even larger snake. Considering that in recent years, size records for some reptiles keep being broken, and that when sighting creatures underwater or partly submerged, light refraction and visual error make true size hard to judge, and since snakes are considered supernatural in much of Africa, for example, the Luo around Lake Victoria fear snakes and see them as evil, while in Nigeria's Njaba, snakes are seen as the wealth of deities, and anyone who harms them is punished, even with death. All this adds to the mystique. As for the truth about Lao, it remains an unsolved mystery to this day. Whether it is a real animal or a product of colonial and indigenous cultures colliding, its story has at least given that endless swamp a lasting aura of mystery, and given later generations a reason to seek this UMA. To end as always, the unknown is always greater than the known. That's the charm of UMAs. That's it for this episode. Thanks for watching.